Hey there! Have you ever wondered why most people just randomly kill each other on sight in Rust? Today I will share my insights with you, looking at the psychological side of things as well as game mechanics that reinforce such behavior. Hello, my name is Antilumpa. As you probably do not know, I have a master's degree in psychology. Also, I love video games because they can let us live out urges and behaviors we wouldn't in everyday life, or try out social interactions that would be inappropriate in any other setting. For example, in video games it is perfectly normal to act out in aggression and violence towards other players. There are little to no repercussions for this, and in many cases aggression is even incentivized. Rust is one of these games where, even though players could interact in a multitude of manners with each other, they choose to kill each other very frequently, most of the times without exchanging any communication beforehand. In fact, the game is so infamous for being violent that even the Reddit community makes memes about the kill-on-sight players. But why is that? Players could also just choose to cooperate, work together, build great bases and live next to each other in peace. I figured that there may be a couple of psychological mechanisms in place here that make violent conflict inevitable. Keep in mind though that in scientific fashion these are hypotheses, as I have not conducted thorough research within the Rust community. That would be another video. Subscribe and comment if that's something you'd want to see. Let's get into it though.
Reinforcement and conditioning.
One of the mechanisms I mentioned is reinforcement. Reinforcement is what happens when you connect a certain behavior with a reward. Say, if you'd get a piece of chocolate every time you'd press a button, you would do it more often than if you did not get a reward for pressing that button. If you've ever trained an animal with treats, you will know this by heart. Rust does the same with you. If you kill a player, you tend to get something out of it. If you harvest a dead player's body, you'll get bone fragments and animal fat, and both of these resources are valuable in early game. If the player you killed carried any resources or items of even more value, even better. Each time you kill a player, you get a little reward. Your brain remembers that. It connects killing players in Rust with joy. It triggers that memory of the time you killed a naked that happened to have 500 scrap on them every time you see another naked, and the urge to murder them in cold blood rises. Another thing Rust then does is conditioning the thrill of the kill through sound design. No, not that kind of conditioning, the psychological kind of conditioning. The one that is known to most people through a certain Ivan Petrovich Pavlov and his dogs. Pavlov always rang a bell when feeding his dogs until they salivated just from the sound of the bell alone. You know that crunchy, nice headshot sound? Yeah, that one. That very sound signals success to you. It signals that you are getting closer to your goal of killing a player. That sound is your bell and murder is your saliva. Headshots become an end and not just the means to it, further increasing your will to kill. The sound alone is satisfying to hear to any seasoned Rust player. Notice how it instantly feels good.
Learning by model.
Another psychological phenomenon that turns the average Rust player into a bloodthirsty monster is something called learning by model. Learning by model is part of the social cognitive theory and was most famously described by psychologist Albert Bandura. Bandura let children watch adults interact with a doll. Children who saw the adults interact with their doll in an aggressive manner were aggressive towards the doll themselves. Children who saw adults interact in a peaceful manner with the doll interacted with it in a peaceful manner themselves. Since you are on YouTube and you are watching a video on Rust on YouTube, you'll probably see a lot of recommended YouTubers that boast about going deep into a base, making sick plays, or raiding a clan of Korean hackers. These people are showered with praise, views, and upvotes, and even gain a moderate amount of fame through this. You might not notice it, but if you've watched a couple of videos by famous Rust players, you might look up to them, you might admire them, you might even want to be like them, especially since their videos are reduced to the bits where things go well for them and where they make all the good moves on other players. Those are the parts that stick with you. Now, especially if you are new to the game, you're going to see that as a model for interacting with players in Rust. Me, personally, I bought the game after seeing gameplay videos on YouTube. Naturally, I thought killing on sight was the norm. Reflect on that if you will. When did you see your first Rust video and how did it affect your interaction with other players? Throw me a comment if you will. I'd be happy to read them all.
Frustration.
Let's talk about frustration though. Now there's something you don't need to study psychology to figure out, yet apparently Dollard et al. Found it worthy of a study as early as the 1930s. There's a strong correlation between frustration and aggression. That means if you frustrate people, they become more and more likely to lash out in aggression. Go figure, right? I could hypothesize how the finer inner mechanics of that work, but that would lead too far. Matter of fact is, Rust can be pretty darn frustrating. You grab some nice loot, get in a fight, get out of it with tooth and friggin' nail, only to get poked by a naked with a stick. You come home from work, you log onto Rust, only to find you got raided. You get door camped by some idiot who goes deep on your base because you were not careful with your airlock. The game is frustrating, period. It's only natural that such frustrations would lead to more aggression, thus increasing the spiral of frustration.
Competition.
Let's talk about another aspect, competition. In Rust you have to compete for certain resources. Why? Well, for one, you want that AK. You want that nice looking base which requires upkeep. You want to research guns and gears to be ahead of other players and kill them more easily, etc, etc. All of these resources are sort of sparse. Construction materials spawn at a rather slow rate, gathering them is dangerous, and the more interesting loot items are so rare that you can go an entire wipe cycle without ever stumbling over them at all. This creates a certain tension, making you envy those who have the resources, while at the same time increasing the risk that gathering resources pose by increasing the envy of others. Mustafa Sharif has conducted a few famous studies in the 1950s. In his studies, he pinned teams against each other in competing tasks with limited resources. Subsequently, these teams opposed each other and started becoming hostile towards one another. So that clan that built right next to your clan, they will be going for the same resources, looting the same bases and monuments. Naturally, the competition for these resources will pin you against them and force a conflict between you all. The same mechanic increases cohesion within your clan though. Because you are a group of people going for a common goal, your team becomes even more tight. That'll be subject of a whole nother video about forming teams and such sometime in the future.
This is where the video is about to end.
Alright, that'll be it for today. I hope you learned something and I hope I got all my facts straight. If you notice that I made an error, please comment down below or shoot me a DM on my Twitter. I'll be sure to post corrections. If you've learned something, maybe it'll change the way you play Rust, or maybe you'll understand your fellow players better. I have a few more videos like this one planned in the future, so if you think this is interesting, then do subscribe, otherwise you'll miss out on psychology in gaming videos. Thanks for watching, and until then, I wish all of you a splendid time.